All right, what's up, Jordan? So let's get settled in here. We're trying a couple different things right now. We're going live on Instagram, double box, but we're also going dual on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. So can you hear me, Jordan?
Yeah, I can hear you good. Do you want me muted on? You want just the sound muted for the StreamYard, right?
Yeah, sound muted on
Okay.
StreamYard so we get no bounce back. It looks like we're good to go. All right, I think this is gonna work. So we got cute quarterback news. We were gonna come and talk some draft, talk to some Kyle Shanahan and things like that. But as we're hopping on here, we just got word the 49ers have signed a quarterback. We now have it's four quarterbacks on the roster. We have Jimmy Garoppolo, we have Josh Rosen, we have Josh Johnson, and now we have Nate Sudfeld, who was most recently with the Philadelphia Eagles backing up Carson Wentz. What are your initial thoughts hearing the news that Sudfeld is on his way back to the Bay Area, apparently a Modesto kid?
I mean, honestly, the first thing I thought of was him getting a bunch of – he wasn't given the best opportunity for his reputation when the Eagles put him in Week 17, when everybody accused the Eagles of tanking. And it was like, well, they put Nate Sudfeld in the game, so clearly they want to lose. I thought that was a little bit shady, truthfully. Like, what did nasty Nate do to deserve just being thrown under the bus like that? Just like you mentioned before we got on, he's had some good preseason games. Maybe it's just a guy they feel that can come in, that's a veteran, that can, be that third, probably, I don't see him being a backup, probably third quarterback option. Maybe it's just a training camp body. I don't know, but I'm not going to lie. The first thing I thought of was that Week 17 game that the Eagles tanked for when they, put in Nate in the fourth quarter of a fairly close game, Week 17. But, why not? The more the merrier at this point. They're taking a QB at 3. Jimmy's still here. Josh Rosen's there. Josh Johnson's there. Like Nate, quarterback party.
Right, seriously. And it's funny because we're dynasty players. We play a lot of fantasy football. So I owned Carson Wentz stock in dynasty. So I typically would have his backup. So I actually rostered Studfeld for some time. It's been a while since he's been on the team, but I do remember watching him play and come out and actually show some promise. Here or there, of course, in games that don't really matter against anything, but at least there's an opportunity there where, hey, at the very least, he's going to be a camp body, come and compete probably for that third quarterback position. Maybe it's a sign of how they feel about Josh Rosen, who was signed off the Miami Dolphins, practice squad last year. But we got some quarterback news. some earth-shattering quarterback news here today. But in regards to that, I think we can move on to our next subject, which is Kyle Shanahan will be in attendance at Justin Fields' second pro day. This came out, I believe, during the press conference that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch had. That was going to happen. Now there's timing confirmed. It will be on April 14th. From what we're hearing, as reported from Matt Barrows of The Athletic, Kyle Shanahan will be in attendance to watch Justin Fields live. What do you think about that? What is there anything that sticks out to you in regards to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they're just doing their due diligence. They want to check all the bases. I think that Javier Vega of Goldmont had a really good nugget that I didn't realize, that you could only send 3 personnel people per team to each pro day because of COVID regulations. So I thought it was very interesting, without knowing that they sent Peters, they sent the director of college scouting, and they sent the quarterback coach to Fields pro day at the same time. Kyle and John went to Tuscaloosa to watch, Alabama. People say to watch Mac Jones. Maybe they were watching somebody else. We don't really know. But that makes more sense now why they would be split up and why they would kind of have each side who are the main decision makers, really, because Adam Peters carries a lot of weight with his influence and with his opinion on players coming out. Obviously, the guy who's going to be working with them probably the closest, and Rich Scangarello went to go watch Justin Fields. But Kyle ultimately is the guy that needs to get sold on this. Kyle and John are 1A and 1B in terms of the people that really need to be on a united front for whoever they do take at quarterback. So I think that it's not surprising in the slightest that Ohio State would be willing to do another pro day for Justin Fields, and why Justin Fields would want to throw for Kyle Shanahan. Because if you're him, you'd much rather come into a very friendly offense in San Francisco for a team that's ready to win, to play for one of the best coaches in the league, who's just an offensive genius, rather than ending up in Atlanta or Detroit, one of these teams where you might not even start right away and you're just kind of wasting away on the bench. So I think he has a lot to prove. I think that he's going to come out. Maybe I know he was a little rusty during the first pro day, but he had some damn impressive throws. He and Zach Wilson have probably the two best. You could go either way. The two best throws that I've seen from a pro day from any players this year. And again, when you're throwing in shorts and a t-shirt, it's not necessarily all going to translate to game speed and wearing pads, having rushers coming at you. But it really does demonstrate the physical ability. And I think that's ultimately the decision that Kyle's going to have to make. Is the physical ability of a Justin Fields so enticing that I'm going to be able to take him without a second thought? And then if there are any, I'm not saying I believe there are, but if there are any issues with, processing or game speed or any little quirks that he thinks he might have, I'm so confident in this player's physical ability and my ability to coach them up and have the staff I've assembled that I'm taking him, and we're looking to dominate not only just the division, but the conference for the next 10 years.
Yeah, and I'm really excited that we get to get Kyle Shanahan in front of Justin Fields again, maybe to change the narrative a bit, just to ease some of our pain as we continue to report on all this stuff. But I think from, just a feel perspective, I think that a lot of the feel for fitting the organization and things like that happens in conversations, that happens in face-to-face interaction. Obviously we understand that there's already a relationship there. They have worked together at the QB Collective and things of that nature. But I think it's just, again, another opportunity for Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, and, some of these other brass to head to Ohio State, watch him throw again. But I think the biggest thing to take away is the in-person meeting, them going out to dinner, chatting up with the agents, doing that whole kind of thing, ensuring that everything feels good, feels right. And, again, with all the Mac Jones noise that seemingly won't go away, it's going to be interesting to see if any of that changes after that pro day, or, of course, as we get closer to the draft. And speaking of all that Mac Jones noise, what is your initial take on all that stuff that's coming out?
I mean, I like Mac Jones more than most people, probably. You were there in the clubhouse when I said that I thought if we were looking purely at just throwing the football, I think he's up there with the better quarterbacks in this class. And again, that's not the extended plays with the legs, the rushing ability, the just arm strength, but just purely throwing a ball consistently to the same spot. I think that there is a tremendous value to be had where you may not have the extremely high ceiling, but you have a guy that what you're going to get week in and week out for the most part. The only concerning thing I have is it really hasn't been that big of a sample size. It's been 17 starts. So hopefully he's going to be in a spot where he can prove to whoever, maybe consider taking him, that he would have done better with a bigger sample size. It's just that Tua was so good. And Hurts was so good. It's not like he was buried on the depth chart behind guys that didn't pan out. Both guys are starting quarterbacks in the NFL now. So I think that Mac Jones' biggest strength, honestly, is he's very composed. And I think that's to me, as somebody who, would accept it but isn't thrilled about the thought of it, that's how I can start to rationalize why Kyle Shanahan might see something that he really likes, where he's like, this guy, when the pressure comes and it breaks down and he's going up against SEC defenses, or even the teams at the bottom of the conference have phenomenal athletes, when the pocket breaks down, from the tape I've watched of Mac Jones, he does such a good job of moving within the pocket and having that lateral movement and that feel for pressure that he may not see with his eyes or, directly in front of him, but can step side to side. And his ability to step into throws and make throws while getting just absolutely clobbered after he releases the ball is something that really stands out. And I know Kyle's talked about that a bunch. There's a really interesting article when they first got Jimmy in 2017. And that was one of the things that sold him on Jimmy, was the quick release and his mechanics, because he felt that with that release, he could hang in the pocket longer and he would be able to, because Jimmy uses so much of his upper body, he would be able to get the ball out without having to step into his throws. And just that, coming back and thinking of that, that's one thing that I think that Justin Fields does need to improve on, is he takes big steps into a lot of these throws. And again, I'm not saying that I think that that's the total deal breaker, but I could see how Mac Jones might be more appealing if Kyle, like, this is basically how I look at it. If Kyle's like, I know I'm damn good. I know that I'm just smarter than 98% of the other coordinators in this league. I'm outsmarting defensive coordinators week in and week out. I just need a guy that's going to, A, stay healthy and play games, and B, is going to be able to understand the concepts that I'm coaching and understand where I want to go with the ball. And if read A isn't there, read B is there. If an alert route is wide open, he's going to be able to see the entire field and get it to them. And again, I'm not saying that that Jimmy Garoppolo isn't capable of that, but I think that maybe that if I'm just speculating, maybe that might be why they're wanting to move on, because there are a lot of plays on tape where it does seem like there is a secondary or third read or a hot route, an alert route that gets missed. So maybe Kyle's looking at it like everybody thinks that he just wants to get this crazy athlete that's going to take them over the top and, make this a rushing or, a rushing quarterback offense that's vertical, throwing the ball over, which would be awesome. I would love it as a fan, but I also see a very realistic scenario where Kyle's like, I was 6 minutes away from winning the Super Bowl with a team that people didn't really they didn't have them pegged to go to the playoffs before the season. I know how good I am. Just give me a guy that can execute at a competent level, that's going to come in and, is going to study the playbook, is going to study the film each week, and is going to work their butt off. And maybe that's Mac Jones. Again, I don't know Mac Jones personally, so I'm not going to sit here and say he's some football junkie and that Justin Fields or Trey Lance aren't. But if that's how Kyle feels, I could see why that would be a route he would take.
Right, and you make a ton of great points. And then the next thing that we can look at, though, is do you think that Kyle likes Mac Jones that much to trade 2 future first rounds, swap 3 and 12 plus a compensatory third? Do you think that compensation matches what Mac Jones is capable of and in the future? Because let's say we've had this conversation before. What happens in the instance where Mac Jones doesn't come out and maybe live up to the expectations? Do you feel like at that point Kyle has entered into a little bit of a situation where people might start coming for him and coming for, his neck and coming for his job? Obviously, we understand how awesome Kyle is, like only Shans, like all that stuff. Kyle and everything that you've heard from anyone who's played for Kyle understands that what Kyle does for quarterbacks is really make things a lot easier and a lot more manageable. But do you see it an instance where obviously you see that how the fan base is split? You see all that kind of stuff. Do you feel like if the 49ers do go ahead, and obviously, the tape, we've talked about it, Mac Jones, I think, is worthy of being a first round pick. And the talent is there. But do you see a situation where perception could overrule and take over if Mac Jones comes out and, doesn't have his best rookie year or best sophomore year? What do you think the narrative changes to at that point? Oh, there you go. Didn't even notice.
So I think that Kyle, so this is where I look at it. If I'm Kyle, you have all these people, you know how good you can be. You know how close this team is to getting back to a Super Bowl. They won 6 games last year in a year where most teams would have probably finished 2-14, maybe 3-13, with the injuries and the adversity they faced. So if I'm Kyle, I'm looking at this like, I just need to go and get my guy. I need to get the guy that I feel confident in, that I'm going to be able to team up with for the next 5 to 10 years, and I just feel is going to take this team to the next level, which we already saw they were damn close to doing it before. And again, I think so many people get caught up in, well, like Jimmy's a pocket passer, so why would they take Mac Jones? Mac Jones is a pocket passer. They're the same player. And I think that really doesn't account for how different styles of, quarterbacks play and how much goes into actually being a quarterback. And I'm not sitting here tagging on Jimmy Garoppolo. I'm just saying that maybe Kyle sees something that Mac Jones does that he's not seeing from Jimmy. It could also just be the plays close enough, and he knows he had success with Jimmy, but Jimmy cost $25 million a year. Mac Jones is going to be on a rookie deal for 5 years, and it'll allow us to keep Fred Warner and keep Nick Bosa and keep all these really good players. Debo's due for an extension. Ayuk will eventually have to be, so you start thinking long term maybe. But in terms of the question, like Kyle's in a no-lose position here, in my opinion, because what happens is if he swings for the fences on this quarterback, he takes Mac Jones, let's say, and Mac Jones ends up just being like an average quarterback, and they win, 8 to 9 games a year, 10 games a year, but they don't win a Super Bowl. They're making the playoffs. They're a fringe playoff team, and the front office gets fed up, and let's say they don't renew Kyle's contract when I think he's still locked into like 2025. I don't think there's a single team in the league currently today outside of Kansas City and maybe the Rams that wouldn't immediately move heaven and earth to find a space on their staff for Kyle Shanahan. So I think he's acutely aware of that too. Kyle's a very smart guy. Yeah. So I think I'm not saying that he's just like gambling with our money as fans or the franchise's money, but he kind of is playing with house money at this point, because even if he misses on this, I don't want to say if the only thing that would be catastrophic is if Mac Jones was just like a total bust who couldn't play in the NFL and he fizzled out after like a year and a half. Like if he came out and he was just this terrible quarterback that couldn't go through his reads, couldn't throw, all these things, and the Niners are sitting here without that capital for the next couple of years, maybe people start looking at Kyle Shanahan differently. Maybe if he goes somewhere else, they don't give him as much say in personnel decisions. But I just think that he's in such a strong position now where it's just, I would love to hear the conversations that went into, with him, John, and Jed to move this stuff. And I think that we do have to give Jed York and the ownership a lot of credit too, because you're not making a move like that without ownership okaying it. Right. And I know a lot of people were getting fed up that the Rams were just signing off on everything, and they were trading for Stafford and trading for Cooks and trading for Ramsey and trading for all these players. So I think that we do need to give credit that the 49ers front office was like, hey, you know what? We're going to step up to the table too, and we're going to take some risks. We're going to, calculated risks. We're going to think this through. And I think that's part of why they moved up to 3. They might not have had a specific player in mind, but knowing that they're going to have the rest of the players after likely Lawrence and Wilson at their disposal, the decision's on them. It's not a situation where, we gave up a couple firsts and we got to 5, but the guy that we really wanted that we could have had ended up getting taken, at pick number 3 or 4 or whatever. So they put themselves in a really strong position where now they control their own destiny. So I think that Kyle's in a spot where that might be something that holds him accountable, to answer your question. Like, he's in control of his own destiny at this point, because I think we all know, John Lynch is going to have some say. Peters is going to have some say. All the scouts, I'm sure they value all their opinions. Kyle's ultimately the guy that's going to be he's either going to get all the credit or all the blame for this decision. So I think that it may hamper his reputation a little bit if he swings and misses really bad, because I think that this is the first time that he's really had his pick at a franchise guy, because I really don't count CJ Beathard. It was a 3rd-round pick. It was just kind of like, he made it worse when he said that he thought CJ Beathard was the best quarterback in the class. If he didn't say that, I don't think it would be nearly as egregious. But again, if he felt that way, I respect him sticking to his convictions. But this is the first time that Kyle's really swinging at a quarterback. And honestly, the success rate on quarterbacks isn't great in the first round. It's like 30%, 35% or something like that. So I can empathize where if he misses and then all people are just like, Kyle Shanahan doesn't know how to evaluate talent. He doesn't know how to pick quarterbacks. Like, I could see the fan perception being much worse than the actual professional perception amongst like again, if Kyle Shanahan swings and misses on the quarterback here and the Niners get rid of him, he's not going to be on the street looking for a job for very long.
Right. And I think that's a great I think that's a great point, because I think I prefaced the question in the sense of almost like a media fan perspective, but I think you're absolutely right. When you're in those closed doors and in the war room with all these other teams, they would chop off their left arm to have Kyle Shanahan running their scheme, doing what he does and what he's doing with the 49ers. I think it's clear as day that Kyle Shanahan is extremely valued within the NFL community. And if for whatever reason fans somehow forced his way out of here, he would land on his feet somewhere else. But I think one of the things that I personally have concerns with, of course, I deal with fans every single day, and that's who we're engaging with and who we're hearing from. So my biggest thing with getting Mac Jones at 3, giving up the compensation to get to 3, and if it didn't work out, just more than anyone the energy that comes along with Jimmy Garoppolo. Every day the timeline is lit because there's conversations being had about Jimmy Garoppolo and how polarizing he is as a player. I honestly feel like that same energy instantly transfers to Mac Jones and instantly transfers to Kyle Shanahan, and instantly you then have how many, months until the season of 49ers fans and all of that hyper analyzing the situation and what have you. It just feels like a scenario that, obviously the football minds are going to do what they're going to do. The football guys are football guys for a reason. Media guys are media guys for a reason. I'll always trust the football guys. So if that's the route that Kyle goes, like we've talked about it many times, we can understand it. And we get it. But I think the average fan won't get it and they won't understand it. And although the same issues that have come and basically been spun off of, Jimmy Garoppolo and all those things, it just feels like that would be injected into Mac Jones. And I'm concerned about any player, their mental well-being, their health. I mean, like the reason why, because of the Mac Jones situation and how it's being seemingly, Schefter came out, said he'd be shocked if it wasn't Mac Jones. Matt Miller said 95% chance it's Mac Jones. I think fans would have a really hard time with that. And so my biggest concern is, let's say if, Mac Jones comes out and puts up Jimmy Garoppolo type play and or a little below that, it's going to be a long season. It's going to be an extremely long season, especially if you look over at whoever else gets Fields, gets Lance, and let's say they're playing at a higher level than Mac Jones. I feel like there's going to be a lot of feelings and emotions that come along with that, and just concerned for the overall well-being, like from a holistic standpoint of the franchise at that point, because they're feeling the Jimmy Garoppolo stuff. That's why they're moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo, right? So again, it just feels like you're preloading a situation that they're trying to get away from, and it could almost just transfer that energy into this new guy, which isn't fair, right? It's not necessarily how it should be, but we know how fans think, and it's an emotional thing, and there's an emotional attachment, all that kind of stuff. So it would just be really interesting to see what happens. And, if, like, let's say, of course, we're going to have the best hope in mind that Mac Jones, if selected at 3, comes out, balls, does exactly what we think he's going to do in X, Y, and Z. Everything's fine. Everyone forgets about it, whatever. My concern, though, is if he just plays mediocre. Like, if he just plays mediocre, then I feel like that same energy just transfers. And with a young quarterback, I'm super concerned about their mental, the outside noise. Our fans are ruthless, dude. I don't know how many times I've seen our fans go after our own guys, Ahkello Witherspoon, Brian Allen. It doesn't matter. They will come at your throat if you mess up. And so I'm just concerned about having that energy preloaded and then shift into a rookie. It just concerns me. Obviously, the football guys, they don't care. They're not thinking of it like that. They have their boards. They have their reasonings. They have all that stuff. I'm just looking at it from that perspective, where it makes me a little nervous. It really does. It really, really does.
What gets me too is I think one thing that we may not think about, you probably do because I would say we as fans, but you probably do. You played. You also have, big celebrity. You have Kittle and Mostert in the comments all the time. But thinking about guys like that, like George Kittle, Raheem Mostert, Mike McGlinchey, Trent, like these guys that are veterans who've been around, who've had success, they've tasted success, and they've had that success with Jimmy as the quarterback. You're really going to have to sell them as well. And I think that actions will always speak louder than words in any facet of life. But you need a guy, like I think like a lot needs to ride on getting a guy that's going to come in. And while he may not take over right away, if they're true to what they're saying and they keep Jimmy, that guy's going to need to show up to camp and give the team some kind of assurance, with their own eyes. Oh, okay, I see why coach and, our front office wanted to move up and get this guy. We know how outspoken the support is for Jimmy Garoppolo. So maybe it's a situation where they're like, hey, we think Jimmy's pretty good, but damn, this Justin Fields guy can run. He has cannon for an arm. He brings a new dynamic to our offense. I can see why Kyle really wants to bring him in. Whereas if they take Mac Jones, I think it's a situation where if there's a learning curve, which there almost assuredly will be, the offseason could be weird. There's still COVID regulations. We don't know if they're going to have regular OTAs and all these things. And they come in, I think then you're in a position where these guys are professionals and they're damn good at what they do. They'll be able to deal with it. But it's totally fair to wonder if, a George Kittle or a guy on the team, a Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel is sitting here and they're like, damn, why do we give up 3 first-round picks for a guy that can't beat out the guy we already have? Like, what's he doing that the guy we already have doesn't do? So I think that is a situation that you have to account for because, again, they're getting paid to be professionals. They get paid a lot of money. I'm just saying there is a human element nature to all of this, even if they are like, I'm not saying that they should be placated and have all their needs. It's a business and that's not how it works. But I could see there being an element where I don't think Kyle would lose the locker room. I'm not going like that far. But if he were to take a Mac Jones and Mac Jones just ended up not being very good and was very clearly not as good as Jimmy Garoppolo off the bat, I think the doubt starts to kind of creep in, and then it's kind of like, well, why are we pushing this guy out the door for this guy? So again, I trust Kyle Shanahan's decision, but I think that it's very important that he gets a guy who immediately is going to impress not only the fans, the front office, but the team especially. I think those are the guys that need to get sold the most, and that's why I'd be the most comfortable with Justin Fields at 3 because I think he's a guy who comes in right away and is going to add another element to the offense. I think Richard Sherman was on Chris Collinsworth podcast that they do together, and that's one thing he was talking about. He's like, man, Kyle's offense is tough enough to deal with as is. You add a running element to this offense. You add a guy that can run RPOs that even if, one of your comps for him is he's a lot like Russell Wilson with the way he can extend plays. I think that the value to extend plays and finish with your arm is more valuable than just the ability to take off and scramble. He brings that element as well where, hey, maybe that first read didn't have time to get open. They're going up against Jalen Ramsey twice a year. Maybe Ayuk wasn't able to get by on the first, 2.5, 3 seconds of the route. You buy him 5 seconds. Even Jalen Ramsey isn't sticking guys for 5 seconds consistently. It's almost impossible to do. So that's where, like I said, logically, it has to be Justin Fields. That's how there's no way objectively I could look at this and I'm like, Mac Jones has to be the guy. But I'm not Kyle Shanahan. I don't know what he's been asking him. And the only thing I'll say is the Mac Jones stuff, the only logical way I could think that they would strategically be leaking any of this stuff, which again, I'm not implying they are, I'm just saying if they are, and that's why we're hearing all this, is I think that if you give people 6 weeks to kind of digest that Mayo Mac is the guy, like we've seen plenty of your lives on Twitter, all this social media, people are slowly coming to grips where at first it was like, oh, hell no. And there's a lot of people who still feel that way, and I totally respect it. We're like, oh, hell no, I don't want Mac Jones. But now that you see people slowly coming around and doing, like I'm doing it myself, the mental gymnastics of convincing myself, well, Kyle Shanahan knows better. Maybe there's something that I want, So I'm trying to look at it as to why I would be okay with Mac Jones coming. Again, if it's up to me personally, it would be Fields or Lance just because of the upside they have and the rushing floor. I always talk about rushing floor because if you have a quarterback that can run, even if they're a rookie and they're struggling, you're going to be able to add a dynamic to your offense that other defenses are going to have to account for. That's going to immediately make you better. But the only thing I'm thinking is maybe the front office is kind of like, hey, we've zeroed in on Mac Jones. If we could slowly, let people know that that's what's coming. Because if you think about it, like let's say they traded up for 3, we all assume it's Fields or Lance for an entire month, and then Mac Jones gets picked. Dude, it would be anarchy. And it probably still will be.
Will be.
But it'll be a little bit more sedated because I think people have had time, again, to do the mental gymnastics where we sit here and we talk about why maybe Kyle feels that he would be that guy. Again, I just think that watching Justin Fields and watching Mac Jones a lot, they both do different things that I like a lot. I just see Justin Fields as a guy that I would mortgage future picks for because of the potential that he has. Whereas Mac Jones is somebody, if they took it 12, would have been totally cool with it. But I just don't feel the compensation is what gets me at 12, solid value. At 3 with no
Mac
first
Jones
round
at
picks.
12, like you could sell me on that every single time because I know Fields, Lance are gone, and fits right into kind of what we're already talking about, because that's been a big discussion point leading up to before we were even at 3. It was Mac Jones, guys, is a fit for Kyle and what he does coming out of the system that Sarkisian ran. Sarkisian stole a lot of things from Kyle. Let's be honest. He took a lot of Kyle's schemes and put those into his offense, and you see them translate. And you look at Mac Jones, you could see him fitting into the offense. He's a little bit more mobile in the pocket than people want to give him credit for. But I think the problem is just the value. It's just the value and the ceiling. And again, where the league is headed, where we're seeing everything go in regards to the future of the league. It just really feels like you need a guy to be able to do the Russell Wilson things, to be able to extend plays, to be able to move outside the pocket and not just be a runner. And that's not what I want out of my quarterback. I don't want a running quarterback. I want the threat of a running quarterback. That's essentially it. And so for me and how I look at this, I of course would like Fields. And I think that makes sense. And I think it makes sense from the compensation standpoint, the athletic upside that he brings. To me, you can look at him and be like, he's probably the least scheme-friendly quarterback that fits what Kyle does coming out of college, out of any of these top 5 quarterbacks. I would say Mac's system obviously clearly resembled what Kyle did. Trey Lance ran a lot of play-action concepts that are very similar to what Kyle does. And with Fields, he played a lot out of the shotgun. I don't know the exact numbers. I would actually like to understand like what percentage he played out of shotgun. But with those things, you can learn to play under center. You can pick that up. You can be able to pick up those things. So those kinds of translations are not as big of an issue for me. I just want to make sure my guys can read the field, play with poise inside the pocket, be able to have the right mobility to be able to get away from pressure inside the pocket. So it's going to be a ongoing discussion from here on until the draft. But let's pivot a little bit because obviously we've been talking a ton about quarterbacks.
Can I throw one thing in real quick before you pivot?
Yeah. Go.
So Nick Wagner, who covers the 49ers for ESPN, real quick on the draw, like the under center and snaps out of the shotgun. Justin Fields had 6.3% of his dropbacks under center, and 5.8 of the dropbacks came from under center with play action, which is that's what Kyle likes to do. He likes to run 21, 22 personnel looks. 6%, people will think, oh, that's such a small amount. Mac Jones only had 1.9% of his dropbacks come from under center, and only 1.9 came from under center with play action. So I think that's something to me that stands out a lot, because then it's like, I agree. A lot of the schemes, a lot of the route concepts were very similar that Sark was running at Alabama. But I think that you could make the argument that Trey Lance had 30% of his dropbacks under center, and 24% came from under center with play action. Watching the tape, they run leak a lot. They run a lot of these same concepts that Kyle likes to run. So I think that there's this narrative that Mac Jones is just going to be this under center drop back, passer. And I'm not saying he can't do it, because that's one of the main things I can tell anybody who's doing draft evaluations. If you haven't seen a guy do something, don't assume that they can't. Just don't bank on them doing it. But it's like last year, everybody said that Justin Jefferson was only a slot receiver. He couldn't win outside, or not everybody, a majority of people. And he made everybody look like idiots who said that. Right. I'm not saying that Mac Jones can't take snaps from under center, but Justin Fields did it more often than he did. So there's this weird narrative that Fields is this spread quarterback that can't take snaps under center, when Mac Jones was doing it at a substantially higher rate. So
yeah, and see, this is why I love getting Jordan on here, because he is able to provide the analytical analysis that really supplements what we see on tape, because it is super helpful. Because like you said, I wanted to understand, because I clearly had a perception, and you just straight up said that's not the facts. The facts actually point in the opposite direction. So again, you're just making the case for me wanting Fields even more.
It has to be right. Like I know you want to move off
Right.
quarterback, but just like
Right.
it makes the most sense. And it's a case where if the Niners take Fields and he ends up not panning out, which I think he'll be a good NFL quarterback. But if he ends up not panning out for whatever reason, I'd sleep much better at night knowing that they swung for the fences and they went for a guy that would take them to this next level. I would, that's not ideal. I want him to obviously be very good and win a lot of games and hopefully win a couple Super Bowls. But if they swing and miss on Mac Jones, I would be a little salty. I would be. I have a hard time questioning Kyle Shanahan, but I would feel a little salty about it. If it's Justin Fields and they swing and miss, hey, it happens, but they took the risk on the guy that's the clearly superior athletic talent.
Right, and absolutely. And again, when we get back into, the fan perception, that's one of the things that, of course, I'm very cognizant of. We're talking to fans all day. We're getting their reactions. We understand how charged up they are. They love this team, bro. The fans of the 49ers absolutely love this team and everything that they stand for. So they just want to see us be successful, man. They just want to make sure we get the right guy. Of course, I forget who said it, man. Someone said it, but it was like, if Kyle Shanahan goes up to number 3, trades all these assets, and takes Mac Jones, it will literally be the most arrogant move in the history of the NFL. And that's what it feels like. It really feels like if that was the case, he's like, screw all of you guys, screw all of you and your narratives and your perceived study and metrics and all that stuff. This is my guy. This is the guy who I'm choosing for the first time to lead my team. You talked about it before. He's never had carte blanche to pick his guy. So that would be really, it's going to be fun, man. We're going to have so much to talk about. And yes, I was trying to get us off quarterbacks for a little bit.
That's my bad. I was going to add something else, but I'm going to save it for another time.
If you got something else, go for it. Because honestly, this is what people want to hear.
It was just compounding on what you said. So Sam Monson from PFF is a guy who I really like. I think he brings great analysis, but he's also very entertaining. His takes are always very good. And I was listening to a podcast that he was doing with Steve Palazzolo, and he talked about how there's this wave of quarterbacks that are coming out, and they're all athletic, and everybody's moving to more college-oriented stuff, more RPOs, more spread offense, all these things. And he's like, what a statement it would be from Kyle Shanahan if he came out and he was just like, no, like I don't need all this. I just need a guy that's going to come in and execute my system. I know what I'm good at, and I know what I expect from my quarterback. And it would be a very strong endorsement from one of the brighter offensive minds in the league if he was like, I have the disposal of these two. We're assuming Wilson and Lawrence are off the board. I have the choice between Fields and Lance, and I'm picking the unathletic pocket quarterback. And it would be a very bold move and a very strong endorsement that Kyle's not going to get caught up in whatever the next trend is or whatever the way the league may be tilting. And he's like, I'm going to stick to my guns and I'm getting what I feel comfortable with. And again, that's if it happens that way. But I thought about that a lot. That kind of would be a very bold statement beyond the fact that we as 49ers fans would have to come to grips with it. The whole league would kind of have to be like what does Kyle Shanahan know that I don't know? Like, what's he seeing in Mac Jones that we're not seeing? Because again, I don't know how Mac Jones ended up getting up to 3. I remember watching during the season, he was getting talked about as like a day 2 guy. Then it was like a late first maybe. And then now all of a sudden he's in the mix as the top 3. Like, I don't get it. But,
I don't know. I don't get it either.
Maybe Kyle sees something we don't. And that's the thing at this point. I'll end it on this because I know you want to get off quarterbacks. All I wanted was for Kyle Shanahan to pick his guy. That's all I wanted. That's all I asked for was go get your guy, go get somebody that you could make work because it seemed like at times, and again, I wasn't there. I'm not in the locker room. I'm not on the sidelines, but it seemed like there was some disconnect based purely on body language between him and Jimmy. This year, I think the frustration really creeped in. So maybe it'd be better for both parties if they both had a fresh start. And if Kyle can go and get his guy, I'm going to feel great about it because that's all I can ask. It's tough for me to sit here and be like, go get your guy. And he's like, all right, my guy's Mac Jones. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. Try again. Like, who am I to say that to him? So I'm going to trust Kyle until he gives me a reason not to trust him is basically my point.
Yeah. And that honestly, that should be the take. That honestly should be the take. But I think we understand it's draft season. We pick sides. We like who we like. And that's how we roll. So it's good for content. It's good for the brand. And we're just going to keep rolling. And obviously we'll know eventually who's going to be our pick at 3. Until then, we're going to talk and beat it into the ground. So I'm going to open up the floor right now to you guys if you want to ask Jordan and myself some questions. And while the questions start coming in, just let's talk a little gems. Who are some, like, maybe 1 or 2 gems that you're thinking of, maybe day 2, day 3, that you just really like that could fit what Kyle does?
Are we talking offense or defense?
Let's go both sides of the ball.
So offense, I really like Demetric Felton. My guy Jake Schultz put me on him the beginning of last season, and he's listed as a halfback, but he played a lot of slot receiver. He's out of UCLA. If you have any time, check out some of his highlights. Or I know everybody doesn't have access to all 22, unfortunately, but if you go on YouTube, you could see just some of why it would make sense for Kyle. Very shifty, and the ability to play multiple positions, I think, is so vital for what Kyle's done. Because what Kyle's essentially done is he's taken an offense that's it's predicated on getting yards after the catch, and it's predicated on being this kind of positionless, non-traditional, where you have Deebo Samuel lining up as a halfback one play, running a fly sweep the next. You have George Kittle, who's a tight end, but really is just an offensive weapon, who maybe looking for a pancake block on this play, maybe outlining up in the slot, getting a shallow crosser that's designed to get him upfield with blocker. This entire offense is basically predicated on being free-flowing and interchangeable. And if you took a guy like Felton, who's probably going in the back end of round 3, maybe early round 4, if they get really lucky and he's there at 102, I would definitely pull the trigger. But you get a guy who can line up in the backfield, but has the ability to play slot receiver as well, has the ability to run those fly sweeps, and he's just shifty. His footwork is crisp. He's very good at getting in and out of his breaks, and he has great vision as well. So I'm envisioning a scenario where, if we all remember, I know it seems like ancient history now, but when the Niners got Jerick McKinnon, Kyle he was so excited to have this dynamic running back that he could line up in the backfield, run those choice routes out of the backfield, run a lot of these plays where the halfback is getting isolated on an oversized linebacker or a safety that might not be as fast, and getting them one-on-one in a position, because what he's really good at is getting guys in a position to succeed one-on-one, and it's very impressive considering how much zone coverage gets played at the NFL, how good he is at still isolating guys with these skill sets. So if he was to get Felton, I think he would fall into a role where maybe he's listed as a halfback, but you still have Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert who are going to do a lot of the carrying, but maybe on a 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, you bring Felton in the backfield, you have no idea what's coming. He could shift. If they see something they like at the line of scrimmage, you could shift him out into the slot. You could run empty with him. Again, have him run those fly sweeps, and it puts defenses in a very tough position because they have to account for this guy as a runner and as a receiver. And he honestly probably could go back and return punts and kicks too. I hate to say that's one area for me that's kind of been their biggest weakness, it seems like, the last couple of years, is they haven't really had a dynamic returner. And I think even just averaging 7-8 yards a punt return makes such a huge difference, because that 8 to 9 yards ends up flipping the field in your favor, to where even if you aren't stringing a drive together, you're getting an extra 8 to 9 yards when you're punting the ball back and forth. And I think that the field of special teams isn't very glamorous, and a lot of people really don't care about it, but it does matter so much. So if you get a guy in the 3rd round that can provide that value as a slot guy, as a kind of do-it-all halfback offensive weapon, and the returning kicks, it's tremendous return on the investment, even if they aren't getting tremendous touches ahead of an Ayuk or a Deebo, and they're not carrying the ball a bunch because Mostert's damn good and Jeff Wilson is damn good. It would make sense that he's not going to jump these guys in the pecking order, but he just does so many things that you really like. And again, if anybody has time to watch him, go watch him and watch his feet and watch how quick and shifty he is. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, damn, this dude he's one of those guys that could make people miss in a phone booth. I love that cliched saying because it really does exemplify how good this guy is at making people miss.
Yeah, you nailed it on the head. Demetric Felton was someone that I actually didn't really know too much about when I was on my way to Mobile to watch the Senior Bowl. But really quickly, I found out who Demetric Felton was. Demetric Felton was destroying people all over the field at the Senior Bowl. And that was the thing, is he was a running back in college, like you mentioned, but he came out and played almost primarily as a wide receiver at the Senior Bowl. And to be able to see the routes, the shiftiness, the ability to move in space, and again, bring technique behind it. Not only just the raw athletic ability, but the ability to bring the technique behind it to be able to twist these defenders up. It was really fun to watch live. And you could see too, I think I was watching him, and he kind of, I don't know if I would say he's a comp to Marquise Goodwin. I just remember the vibe Marquise Goodwin gave off when I went to the open field practice at Levi's. I think it was 2017 when the 49ers did that, which was an amazing event. I wish they did that again, but that was such a fun event when they had the open practice, and that was when I got to see Marquise Goodwin in live for the first time. He had a legitimate energy that you could feel from the stands in that open practice. And I was just watching Demetric Felton kind of walk around. I was like, he kind of has that swag. He kind of has that energy that just kind of that follows him around. And so if the 49ers could somehow get and pair him with Kyle Shanahan, I think that would be a lot of fun. But also what a couple people have been mentioning in the chat is what are your thoughts about Najee Harris's comments about how much he's been in contact with the 49ers? Does that kind of tip your hand or tip the 49ers hand that, hey, maybe Kyle is looking to draft a running back high, first, second round? Typically the narrative around Kyle is he can find running backs undrafted late. I mean, look at the running backs on our roster: Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, JaMychal Hasty, all undrafted guys. Do you think there's a potential for maybe Kyle is looking for that legitimate bell cow of the future? Obviously, we love what Raheem brings and what Jeff Wilson brings, but do those comments that Najee came out and said he was talking hella with the 49ers, do you think that kind of almost tips their hand a little bit that they could be going after a big time running back early?
So there's been rumors that actually the last couple, I think going back to 2019, the Niners have taken a serious look at taking a running back early, taking a guy that would be more of a bell cow, would be more of a, 3-down back that's going to get the majority of carries. I just don't think there was anybody that really sold them enough, or they obviously didn't have the second round pick last year. They obviously weren't picking really in the middle, day two. I think they didn't have a pick at all either. So they're in a spot now where they could kind of justify it. They have so many solid players around the roster that I hate using the word luxury pick because I think you should always take the best player available. Right. But Najee has he's a Bay Area guy. I don't care what team you end up playing for. If you're from the Bay Area, I'm going to support you. I'm going to wish the best for you. As a local guy around here, like anybody who's from this area, I'm going to support you. But if you remember when he was playing in Antioch, he was highly touted, and it was a huge deal that this guy was going to Alabama. And he not only goes to getting to Alabama was this huge accomplishment. He dominates SEC competition, and I like Najee better than I would like an Etienne. Personally, I know that's your guy. No offense, I'm not trying to bring him down, but I think what Najee brings is he brings a lot of intangibles. He brings tremendous vision. His feet are great. He's powerful, but he's not slow. Like he can run through guys, but he's not a slow guy. So I can envision a scenario where Kyle's looking at it, and he has a phenomenal running back in Raheem Mostert who's averaging over 5 yards a carry. I think he averaged like 6.5 or something, 6.4 or something in the year they went to the Super Bowl. Great for that outside zone scheme. And he's 28 years old, which for most people in life, yeah, you're right in your prime, but as a running back, you're kind of starting to rack up some miles a little bit. So I think immediately I don't see the pressing need for it because I personally am a fan of having a tandem of Mostert and Wilson, having kind of a 1-2 punch between them. I think that would be tremendous value, and they could spend that pick elsewhere because you're likely going to have to – I don't even see Najee falling to 43 at this point, but even if you did take him at 43, there's so many other avenues. You could take a corner. You could take an edge player. Positions that I just personally value more than running back. And again, I say this as a fan of Najee Harris. I wouldn't be upset at all if they ended up getting him. But if I remove my objectivity or my subjectivity and me being from the Bay Area, wanting a Bay Area guy on the 49ers, I don't see the value in doing so. But if it's a long-term thing where you're looking at it and you're like, I think Mostert or Wilson are signed beyond this season. I think Wilson might have one more restricted free agency type of deal after this year. My apologies for not knowing the specifics, but I know that there is going to be a void. It's kind of like the cornerback situation this past season where the Niners were just kind of like, hey, we don't have any cornerback signed next season, but we're just going to go and see how it plays out. And they ended up bringing back Mosley. They ended up bringing back Verrett. They brought back K1. So they got it figured out. So maybe they do the same thing. But I think what it does is it gives them tremendous flexibility to where if Mostert goes off again and he's averaging 6.5 yards a carry and he's busting these huge runs and he's having this great season we all know he's capable of having because of that just pure track speed he has, then you're in a situation where if another team, like we saw Mark Ingram get broke off pretty late into his 20s and by Baltimore, if there's another team and a third of the league is running what Kyle's running. So if there's a situation where a team wants to break off Raheem Mostert and they want to pay him more money than the Niners are comfortable paying, you have a guy like Najee slide in. But the thing is like Najee's so talented that I don't see that being like a succession plan. He would have to come in right away and start. So maybe there's a vision where he sees a 3-headed monster at running back. It was odd to me, dude. I'm not going to lie. Like it seemed odd. And again, I really like Najee Harris, but I'm like, you're probably not going to get him at 43. Were they going to? I'm like, were they thinking about taking him at 12? Which anybody who knows me, running backs in the first round are just it's a terrible idea almost all the time. I was a big Todd Gurley fan, a big Ezekiel Elliott fan coming out. Those guys don't last very long in the NFL. Usually.
I was a big Leonard Fournette guy.
Leonard Fournette, yeah, exactly. Even Christian McCaffrey we're seeing now.
Yeah,
it's such a physically demanding. It's such a physically demanding position that I would rather ride with Raheem Mostert for the discount you're getting him this year and Jeff Wilson, and then maybe take a guy like I really like Jamar Jefferson. I really like Javian Hawkins. I really like, maybe they like somebody like I know Jay really likes Michael Carter of UNC. He's somebody you could probably get. Maybe I don't know if it's going to fall, but maybe with that compensatory third-round pick at 102. If you're going to get the succession guy, get a guy later in the draft that you can mold, have Bobby Turner work with for a year. Because if I'm taking Najee Harris, I'm putting him in, I'm giving him the ball 25 times a game. Like, that's how I would feel right away. And where does that leave Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson, who I think are both more than capable of not only being serviceable running backs, but being damn good running backs. And there's some positions where I think you can't have enough good players, edge, receiver, even safety, like anywhere in the secondary. If you have an overflow of talent, that's a good thing. I don't really think that there's a pressing need to have 3 really good running backs, and I just don't see the value. I think Najee may be a better overall, complete package than those 2 guys, but he's not so much better that I'm going to take touches away from Jeff Wilson and Raheem Mostert, who have shown that they are damn good at what they do.
Yeah, and I think all the points that you hit on are absolutely right. And this class is stacked with legitimate running backs that you could have on day 2 and day 3. Someone in the chat mentioned Khalil Herbert. I'm a big Khalil Herbert guy. I could see him being a big fit into Kyle's scheme. Again, he's not going to be a burner or anything like that, but he just does everything well. He's a really good one-cut back who's an exceptional pass blocker. Might be a little bit questionable as a pass catcher out of the backfield, but there are so many other guys, Elijah Mitchell. There's so many other guys that you can pinpoint throughout this draft that you could see. I just posted about Kylan Hill out of Texas A&M. He's another guy that I think could be a starter in this league. So again, I think it's just finding the right value at the correct positional value. But as we get ready to hit an hour, probably going to get this wrapped up here pretty soon. What are your thoughts on like JaMycal Hasty, who's currently on the roster? Do you think he has an opportunity to carve out more of a role for himself, or do you see that being a position in camp where he's competing with potentially a rookie like a Khalil Herbert, Elijah Mitchell, someone like that, along those lines?
I like Hasty. I think Hasty's biggest thing that stands out to me is he's very twitchy. Like he has a good amount of quick shake to him, if that makes sense. Like he's very good on I don't want to say one cut because it's not like necessarily, but when he's out in space, his first move is really quick, and I think he has a little bit more power than his size would indicate. I like Austin Walter a little bit better. I think he has. You're an
Austin Walter guy.
Yeah, I like him a little bit better. And there's no offense to JaMycal Hasty. It's just I think Walter's a little bit better. But I think the Niners are in a position where they have so many of these day 3 picks that they're going to be able to add a couple, maybe not a couple, but they'll be able to add probably a running back with one of those late 5s one of their 6th-round picks, maybe that 7th-round pick, bring in a couple undrafted guys, and really breed out a competition where it's like, okay, we're going to throw a bunch of these guys into the fire, and whoever comes out is going to be the one that, ends up sticking behind a Mostert, behind a Wilson. Because I think we can honestly pencil in Wilson and Mostert, locks, obviously, to make the roster. I don't think there's any way either of them aren't there. Mm-hmm. So I think that Walter and Hasty will have a leg up on any of the rookies because they've been in the system for a year. They've been in the building for a year. They have, more familiarity with things. But yeah, that's honestly what I would do at running back. And I would get a bunch of young guys. And that's the way I look at that position is you just need to constantly be bringing in young talent because of how short the shelf life is and how quickly things change. Again, like I said, I was a big fan of Ezekiel, and I think the offensive line isn't that great in Dallas. Like they've had injuries and problems, but like his rushing yard, he had his best year one, and he's steadily declined. And he's had in the last 3 seasons, his rushing average has gone down. And aside from the production, you get injuries. McCaffrey's missed time. Saquon's missed time. Like these guys, you're just in such a physically demanding position that you're putting yourself in such more of a susceptible position to get hurt. Whereas, and again, I'm not trying to say that they should be valued any less because they're 7th-round picks, but if we're looking at it from a team building standpoint, it's much more easy to absorb the loss of an undrafted free agent or a 6th-round draft pick that gets hurt or the production isn't great than it is spending a pick on a guy in round 2. He's good for a couple years, or even in the first. That's why running backs in the first round should never even be considered, in my opinion. Just the way the league is going now, how much teams throw, it just doesn't it doesn't make sense to me to do it from a long-term standpoint. So I think that they are in a very strong position, essentially. For the JaMycal Hasty question, I think that he has a great chance to make the roster, but I think that they're in a great spot where they're going to get the best out of all these guys because they can add him, Walter, a couple rookies into this competition. And I'm not saying that Jeff Wilson and Mostert are going to be exempt from it. They're going to have to go and show up in camp too, but I think that they've done far more than enough to prove that they belong and they deserve the top of that pecking order coming into the season. But I think at this point, with Mike McDaniel, with Bobby Turner, with Kyle Shanahan, if you are a competent running back that's going to come in and you're going to work hard and understand where these blockers are going to be, how the zone scheme is going to work, and you really put the work in, you're going to be really set up for success. I don't like this narrative that anybody can come in and be a successful running back under Shanahan because it's just not true. Mm-hmm. But I think that if they're willing to meet him halfway and put in the work, they're going to have a leg up that most teams wouldn't have. And there's a really interesting. I'm super into analytics, and there's a graph that's really. I wish I had it here so I could be more specific with it. But Matt Breida was amongst the elite in terms of value from a running back standpoint when these guys use WAR and all these analytic things because he was getting so little amount of carries but getting so much yardage because of the scheme. And the analytics guy posting it was like, damn, I'd love to be a running back for Kyle Shanahan because it was Mostert and it was Breida way up in this top right corner, way ahead of everybody else in their own universe in terms of efficiency from the running back position. So as long as he comes in and he works hard, I think that they're going to the foundation they have in place with that running game and how strong it is, they're going to be in a good spot, which is why, again, I don't think that you need to find a generational talent or some crazy good running back early. You just need to find a guy that's going to come in, put his nose in the playbook, study, work well with the offensive line, and just give it his all, which, again, you'd like to think everybody in the NFL is doing that, but unfortunately that just isn't the case. So if they can pinpoint a guy that's honestly where the character is more prominent than the talent level, I think that the talent stuff works itself out. Just find a guy that's going to come in, that's going to work their butt off. And for all we know, that could be JaMycal Hasty and Austin Walter. I don't know those guys personally, but there was a reason they stuck to the roster last season. So, maybe he will be.
Yep. And you can also circle it back to a situation where, you talked about it earlier in this episode of, Demetric Felton and the versatility he brings because he can play running back. He can. That's what he played at UCLA. He's actually transitioning to be a wide receiver. But let's say you grab a guy like that who offers special teams value, offers value from the running back position, and offers value from the wide receiver position. You can do a lot of things with that kind of guy while also maybe keeping a JaMycal Hasty and Walter on the roster because you have all these. You need special teams players, and that's typically those are the fringe guys that are going to be contributing. So why not? And a guy like Demetric Felton could come in and slot into that kind of, again, positionless player that seemingly you and I are hunting for. We want to find these guys who can play multiple roles so you can maximize their value and maximize what they do on the field. So I think, again, my guy Jordan is always on point. That's why I love talking to him about this stuff. He comes looking at this from multiple different perspectives in regards to analytics, in regards to just watching the tape. My guy watches more tape than pretty much anyone out there. So I love having these conversations with you. And look at that. We're like right on an hour. So I think this would be a good time to wrap it up. We're actually going to be hopping on a pod, you and I, with Kobe. And who's the other gentleman that we're hopping on with? Is it just Kobe who runs the pod?
He didn't say, because I know he does a pod with Niners Wire, but I don't know if it's going to be both of them. He didn't let us know.
We're in for a surprise.
So amateur hour on his end over there, not getting us prepared.
So if you guys want to, again, see more of us continue to talk about the draft, we're going to go on and get a little bit more deeper probably into some later round prospects. Again, kind of divulge like you went in on Demetric Felton and things like that. So we'll be over there on Twitter if you want to check that out. Splash Cousin on Twitter at @splash_cousin. Make sure you follow Jordan. He's also hilarious. So that also combines with the football knowledge. And then obviously you see his @ here. Feel free to follow him at what is it, Jordan 49.
I think it's just Jordan 49 GM.
For sure. So you're going to see our faces a lot as we continue to talk and get through the draft. So again, appreciate you hopping on, Jordan. And until next time, which could even be in the next day or two, we'll be back on to talk the draft. Maybe we'll actually spend less than 45 minutes on the quarterbacks, and we'll actually talk about some other prospects. But we'll see. We go as the wind blows. So I appreciate you hopping on. Any parting words as we get out of here?
No, just thanks to everybody who watched. I love sitting here talking with you, and I love getting the feedback in the comments. And at the end of the day, hey, we're all Niners fans. We're all football fans. We just want to see our guys shining. We want to see them get that 6th Lombardi. So however it happens, we all may have our disagreements. I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. So it's cool to have these different discussions and different viewpoints and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, all we want to see is them raise that 6th Lombardi and turn that 6 into 7 and 7 into 8. And,
exactly.
Hopefully they hit on that pick at 3 and we start another dynastic run. So, at the end of the day, just appreciate all you guys. Appreciate you for having me on, Brad. This is really fun.
Yeah. Awesome, dude. So we'll get after it later today. And then, of course, we'll be seeing you around here in the future. So I'll be talking to you in a second, but appreciate everyone for hopping on. That's it for us today. All right, guys.